easiest way to get into the meditative state is to begin by listening.
Hello and welcome once again to an exploration of Gurdjieff's teachings and other Western esoterica and metaphysics. The first passage I will read out is Cinque contra uno, which is the changes that the Roman culture and the ancient Greek culture introduced into the world culture, and which has many subtle meanings. Then I will consider again and try to assess really the state of consciousness of human beings as they exist and their current level of knowledge. And I noticed that Theodore Nottingham wrote a new book about Gurdjieff, and if I have time I will look at some of the clearly esoteric information that is in, I believe it's John 8. But first to Beelzebub and Cinque contra uno. And so, my dear boy, it was largely on account of the beings of these two groups, Roman and Greek, that the reason of your contemporary favourites has become mechanical, and that the data for engendering the impulse of being shame have completely atrophied in them. The Greeks were the cause of the gradual decay of the reason of the three-brained beings there, which has so degenerated in contemporary beings that it has become, as our dear Mullah Nasruddin says, a real mill for nonsense. And it is thanks to the Romans that, as a result of successive changes in the presence of contemporary three-brained beings, those factors are never crystallized which in other three-brained beings engender the impulse called instinctive shame, that is, the being impulse that is the basis of what are called morals and objective morality. And thus it was that those two communities arose which, as so often happens, there later became solidly established and powerful for a certain time. And the history of the maleficent legacy they passed on to the beings of subsequent generations is as follows. According to the investigations of our countrymen, it seems that the earliest ancestors of the beings of the community that was later called Greece were obliged, during the frequent storms at sea that hindered them in their marine occupations, to seek refuge from the rains and the winds in sheltered places, where they played various games they had invented to kill time. And it later became clear these ancient fishermen at first amused themselves with such games as children play there. But children, it must be remarked, who have not yet gone to school, for today those who go to school have so much homework to do, consisting chiefly of learning by rote the poetry composed by various candid Hasnamusses, that the poor children never have time to play any games at all. But these poor bored fishermen first played ordinary children's games, long since customary there, and later, when one of them invented a new game called pouring from the empty into the void, they were all so pleased with it that from then on they amused themselves with that alone. This game consisted in formulating some question or other, always about some nonsense, that is to say, a question about some deliberate piece of absurdity. and the one to whom the question was addressed had to answer as plausibly as possible. Well, it was just this game that became the cause of everything that happened later. It turned out that among those ancient bored fishermen, several were so clever and ingenious that, following the principle of that curious game, they became expert in inventing very long explanations. And when one of them discovered how to make what was afterwards called parchment from the skin of the fish called a shark, some of these skillful fellows, just to swagger before their companions, even began inscribing these long explanations of theirs on their fish skins, employing the conventional signs invented earlier for another game called mouse trap. Still, a little later, when these bored fishermen had been replaced by their descendants, the latter inherited these inscribed fishskins as well as the craze for this peculiar game, and these various inventions, both their ancestors and their own, were given for the first time the high-sounding name of science. And from then on, as the craze for cooking up these sciences passed from generation to generation, the beings of the group whose ancestors had been simple Asiatic fishermen became specialists in inventing sciences of every sort. These sciences, moreover, also passed from generation to generation, and certain of them have reached contemporary beings of that planet almost unchanged. Hence it is that almost half of what are called the egoplastic chori, arising in the reason of the contemporary beings of that ill-fated planet, from which in general what is called a world outlook is formed in beings, are crystallized just from the truths invented by those bored fishermen and their descendants. And as regards the ancient shepherds who later founded the powerful community called Rome, their ancestors also were often forced on account of bad weather to seek refuge for their flocks in sheltered places and to pass the time together somehow or other. And so, since they were together, they did a lot of talking, but when everything had been talked out and they felt bored, one of them suggested that as a relief they should take up the occupation which they were the first to call cinque contra uno, or 5 against 1, a pastime which has been preserved under the same name among their descendants down to the present time. As long as only the beings of the male sex engaged in that pastime, everything went smoothly and peacefully, but when a little later their passive halves, that is to say, their women, joined in, and immediately appreciating it, soon became addicted to it, they gradually attained such finesses in this occupation that if our arch-cunning Lucifer himself were to rack his honourable brains, he could not invent even a tithe of the turns these erstwhile shepherds invented and prepared for the beings of succeeding generations of that ill-starred planet. Well, over the weekend it was what is called Gay Pride in Brighton, and exotic music poured along the beaches here on the south coast for 3 days straight. People don't know what to do. Let us forgive everybody, but they really don't know what to do except playing these games. We might consider also that actually, the level of civilization for human beings is not that high. And in order to get the mind going, or the higher faculties of your intellect, you do have to start with a few games. You do have to start talking shit. And, in the hope that, just by exploring things in that way, maybe one day somebody's going to work something out. It could be like that. Yeah, it could be like that. Why were the fishermen and shepherds who were stranded by the weather, why were they bored? Why were they bored now and not bored in the past? Something had changed in their civilization. Maybe they had more of an inkling of wishing to do something, rather than the hunter-gatherers who maybe didn't go far, didn't have the technology. You can see as the world changes and the technical ability of people changes, it changes people's expectations, it changes their consciousness. They sort of want to be more active. And if they are not, they get bored and they find another way to drain their energy. Life is moving, the tree of human society is moving, and if there is excess energy, a wise ruler finds a place to put it, to keep people occupied. There's also something else, cinque contro uno, 5 against 1. It's a kind of bullying, an abuse of the body, in the same way as the sacrifice of animals in order to please the god, or to have a righteous war where you destroy the physical form of other people. This bullying, this domination of the physicality is how human beings try to exert their will. They don't know a different way of expressing themselves. Human beings are caught up. They lack insight into things, and so they remain today. I've bored many listeners with the idea of the guilds in Britain that have existed for thousands of years, and it includes the Guild of Masons, legal guilds, medical guilds, and guilds are, because some still remain even if they're 1,000 years old. If you're a carpenter and if you're in a guild and you have a master, and it's a bit like the military. You're working as a carpenter and you have projects to work on and you get paid, but there is somebody ahead of you, above you, who teaches you. Large parts of Britain used to be formed of guilds of many different types, at many different levels, some even coming from ancient Greece, some coming from the period after the Norman conquest, some being Christian, all sorts, some from the Enlightenment, and a great many people inside this country, Britain, were therefore connected to a line of knowledge, which is very important, and slowly grew along one line that they were part of. I did notice that the much esteemed Theodore Nottingham brought out a new book where it appears he wants to blame Mr. Gurdjieff for certain Californian cults that, although they claim to have something to do with Gurdjieff, really are more about violating the sexuality of young men and all sorts of terrible things that really have nothing to do with Gurdjieff at all. But people who come out of cults like that generally have, a lot of baggage that comes out like this. And Gurdjieff talks a lot about the terror of the reciprocal destruction, that people kill each other, and you have to have sympathy because they literally do not know enough about their mind and their psychology to help themselves. They try to, they want to, they know they've got problems, but they don't know how to fix them. And so eventually what happens is the tension gets really high, and then they project on each other. They see what is inside of them, but they hang it on somebody else. They blame other people. They are feeling things inside like anger, anxiety, distrust. It's inside of them, but they do not have enough contact with themselves inside, so they project it. They feel it as if it was coming from somebody else, and then the war starts. That is the state of things. That is the state of things. Beelzebub says, "Soon we shall be absolutely isolated from everything that exists and functions in the whole universe. Yet thanks to my new invention and to the knowledge we have already attained, we now have the possibility not only of returning to the world, to become once again particles of all that exists, but also of being worthy to be non-participating eyewitnesses of certain world laws, which by ordinary uninitiated three-centered beings are considered inscrutable mysteries of nature, but which in reality are natural and simple results automatically flowing one from another." And human beings today, all of them, are becoming isolated from the functions of the universe and live in a kind of global intoxicating dream, and they need to return to the world, to the line, to the tree of life, to feel themselves actually part of it, and to turn off all the rainbows and hysterical mental activity. I was looking at statistics for psychotherapy, and it would seem it fails more than it heals. Only about 20% of people reach freedom, drug-free freedom. 20% are partially healed, drug-free. That's 40%. The rest either completely fail or end up on long-term antidepressants for the rest of their life. And that would seem to be the best technology that people have today. Those people who become Buddhists and do different kinds of practices, you can certainly understand that it may be a good choice and certainly a lot cheaper. John chapter 8. Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down, and he taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery, and when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself, and said unto them, He that is without sin amongst you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down, and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. This world is full of dark energy. It's full of people who have not yet reached a high enough level. It's the nature of the world that pulls you in. It is the maya that pulls you in again and again and again and again. There is no truck with that maya. You have to connect to the light. And the response to maya is to connect to the light, to go deeper into the sunlight. That is the response. That is the way out. There is no solution to the maya because it lives at a low level and it has its own violent ways of dealing with things. In this case, they are trying to pull him in, and he writes something on the ground to cut it so that he hears them not. There's no point hearing people who are lost and full of temptations. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground, and they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one. In other words, he was able to, by writing on the ground, to illuminate some kind of conscience in their hearts, and that brought an end. Because it was something from a higher world that brought an end to the low mechanism of this world. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Go and sin no more. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. The Pharisees therefore said unto him, Thou bearest record of thyself. Thy record is not true. Jesus answered and said unto them, Though I bear record of myself, yet my record is true, for I know whence I came and whither I go, and ye cannot tell whence I come and whither I go. Ye judge after the flesh, I judge no man. And yet if I judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, but I and the Father that sent me. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. I am one that bears witness of myself, and the Father that sent me beareth witness of me. Here they challenge him on his mortal side, because the mortal plane is always swimming in a sea of low energy. But he has fused himself with the Father, with a higher level of existence, and the two that bear witness together cause a reconciling current, and they bring light into this world, and therefore they understand this world from a higher level, and their judgment and their testimony is true. It says the same in A Course in Miracles, where it is Jesus in the mind that you're meant to reach. What people call their mind is the circulation of impurities, the many eyes, that sit in the position in the head. And it is also true that it is through these juvenile parts of our mind that people explore. They explore firstly in a rough way. But if the tree is to flower, then it has to mature into an objective mind, which is a mind that is in contact, which has reached a state of being where it is in contact with something higher than itself. And then you become a conduit for a higher light. It is always like that. We're not individuals because we're born from the tree of life. And, to reach God and to know God simply means that our conduit has reached a level that light shines through it. That is simple and very important knowledge. And he said unto them, Ye are from beneath, and I am from above. Ye are of this world, I am not of this world. I said therefore unto you, that ye shall die in your sins, for if you believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins. Then said they unto him, Who art thou? And Jesus said unto them, Even the same that I said unto you from the beginning. I have many things to say and to judge of you, but he that sent me is true, and I speak to the world those things which I have heard of him. Then said Jesus unto them, When ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father hath taught me, I speak these things. Well, it's really difficult to understand these words from such an ancient time, and that are a mixture of Jewish culture, Egyptian culture, and European history. Once the soil has done that arduous work that is required to turn it into a channel of something higher, then what is higher naturally flows through it. That should be how life is lived, and maybe it is in some places. Receiving, 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 integrating, emanating. I've just taken a walk around the block and I suddenly realized what it all means. Amazing stuff. Really amazing. And yeah, I've noticed that when I walk down the street, I try to kind of roll my shoulders or, look impressive because, that's the state of stupidity that I live in. Yeah, and also, with regards all these ancient technologies and religions, I very much doubt that many people understand them at all, which is a shame because it means they cannot really use them or apply them. It is very strange to be able to decode the Gospels. I never thought that would happen, but I can do it now. And clearly those people were extremely knowledgeable about what is occurring within human beings, and they understood also the principle of legomenism. There is a huge amount of clear technical information inside the Gospels. And what it also means is that they realized that human beings are completely incapable of understanding ordinary information, and so they preserved it in this way. Of course, Jesus was a Jew. I'm not sure people who are not Jewish are capable of understanding. The Western people, although they followed the methods of Christianity, do not appear to have ever understood it, even after all this time. People of the world who are born into a false self because there's nobody around who can teach them anything else, that's all they have. The only thing that they have is the false self, and they cling to it, and the whole world is an illusion, because what is the future for such people? You know, what's going to happen to them after they die? Is everything going to work out? The world then is actually a very dangerous place. People like Lao Tzu, who was capable of writing the Tao Te Ching. Very small numbers of people. It's very strange to see all this stuff. Thank you for listening. Please take care.
Father Ocean, hear my song. You're the wave I was made from. Take me back to where we once began. Ocean Father, I was wrong. Years I followed just the sun. Now I see your darkness holds the key. I close my eyes and I begin to see.